Welcome back to the channel, everyone. If you're new here, you've just stumbled onto a collection of some of the most unsettling stories you'll ever hear, all from people who work in our national parks and forests. Today, we're diving deep into 6 consecutive accounts from park rangers who've experienced things that can't easily be explained. These stories come from various online forums, personal interviews, and ranger communities where these men and women share what they've witnessed in the wilderness. Some of these accounts have been corroborated by multiple sources, others stand alone as singular, terrifying experiences. What makes them so disturbing isn't just what happened, it's how real they feel, how they strip away our comfortable assumptions about the natural world. I've spent months collecting these stories, verifying details where possible, and speaking directly with rangers who were willing to share their experiences. Some spoke on record, others only agreed to talk if their identities remained protected. The common thread through all of these accounts is a sense of wrongness, a feeling that something in the wilderness doesn't follow the rules we expect. It's so, settle in, maybe keep a light on, and let's begin. And if you enjoy what you hear today, please hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps us bring you more of these stories. All right, let's get into it. Story 1. The Stairs. Here's something most people don't know. Park rangers occasionally find staircases in the middle of the woods, not attached to any structure, not leading anywhere. Just freestanding staircases, sometimes carpeted, sometimes wooden, sometimes marble, sitting in clearings or tucked between trees where no building has ever stood. This particular account comes from a ranger named Serenat, her real name, who posted it on a popular forum after 7 years of service. I was able to contact her directly, and she agreed to share more details on the condition that I didn't reveal which park she worked at or use her real name. She'd been warned during training never to approach these stairs, never to climb them, and never to discuss them with hikers. When she asked why, her supervisor simply said, "Because people who do don't come back the same." She pressed him for more information, but he refused to elaborate. He just added it to her orientation checklist like it was a normal safety protocol, right between "don't feed the wildlife" and "always carry bear spray." Sarah thought it was a hazing ritual at first, some kind of inside joke to mess with new rangers. But during her first week, she overheard 2 veteran rangers talking in hushed voices about finding another one near Sector 7. When she asked what they were talking about, they changed the subject immediately. She was 3 years into her posting at a park in the Pacific Northwest when she found her first staircase. It was during a routine patrol about 6 miles from the nearest trail. She was checking some watershed markers in a remote area that hadn't been accessed in months. The forest opened into a small clearing, and there it stood, a set of carpeted stairs, maybe 12 steps high, leading to nothing. The carpet was pristine, a deep burgundy color with gold trim along the edges. No weathering, no moss, no dirt. It looked like it had been installed yesterday, professionally cleaned, and then somehow transported into the middle of nowhere. The stairs themselves were made of what looked like oak, with a polished brass handrail that gleamed in the dappled sunlight. She approached slowly, her boots crunching on the forest floor. The air around the staircase felt different, not colder exactly, but heavier, like the pressure had changed. She stopped about 10 feet away and just stared at it. The craftsmanship was impeccable. This wasn't some abandoned structure from an old homestead. This was new, or at least maintained, but by whom and how? She circled it slowly, keeping her distance. The back of the staircase was just as finished as the front. The carpet wrapped around each step perfectly. There were no tool marks, no screws visible, no signs of construction. It was as if it had simply appeared, fully formed. She radioed it in, gave the coordinates, and her supervisor's response was immediate. "Leave the area. Do not approach. Mark it on your map and avoid that sector." His voice had an edge to it, an urgency that she'd never heard before. "But sir," she said, "there's a staircase out here. Someone must have." "I know what it is. He cut her off. Leave now. That's an order. She left. But the stairs haunted her. She couldn't stop thinking about them. How did they get there? Why were they there? And why was everyone so afraid of them? Over the next few months, she found 3 more in her patrol area, each one different. One was white marble with an ornate banister that looked like it belonged in a Victorian mansion. It had intricate carvings of leaves and vines running up the railings. Another was plain wood, the kind you'd find in any suburban home, simple, functional, with a basic handrail. The third was metal, industrial, with grip tape on each step like you'd find in a factory or warehouse. Each time she found one, she reported it. Each time she was ordered to leave immediately. She started marking them on a personal map, trying to find a pattern. They weren't in a straight line. They weren't clustered together. There was no geographic logic to their placement. She started asking other rangers. Most wouldn't talk about it. They'd change the subject, or pretend they didn't know what she was talking about. But an older ranger named Tom, weeks from retirement, finally opened up after she caught him alone one evening at the station. It wasn't a question. She nodded. Tom sighed and sat down heavily. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've seen dozens of them. Different parks, different states, but always the same basic thing. Staircases where no staircases should be? What are they? She asked. No one knows, Tom said. There are theories. Some people think they're remnants from old buildings that somehow got preserved. But that doesn't explain why they're not weathered, why they appear in places where no structures have ever been recorded. Some think they're markers, put there by, some think. Others think they're doorways. Doorways to what? Tom looked at her for a long moment. It's the question, isn't it? And some people couldn't resist finding out. He told her that in his 30 years, he'd seen what happens to people who climb them. He found a hiker once, sitting at the base of a staircase, rocking back and forth. The hiker was coherent enough to say he'd climbed to the top. When Tom asked what he saw, the hiker just stared at him and whispered, everything. I saw everything I would ever do, and I can't stop it. The hiker's name was David Chen. Tom remembered it clearly because what happened next stuck with him for years. Chen kept repeating that he'd seen his whole future laid out like a movie. Every decision he would make, every conversation he would have, every moment until his death. And the worst part, he said, was that he knew he couldn't change any of it. He was locked into a path, a predetermined sequence of events, and knowing this had broken something fundamental in his mind. The hiker was evacuated, treated for severe psychological trauma at a facility in Seattle. Tom visited him once, 2 weeks after the incident. Chen was sitting in his room, staring at a wall, occasionally whispering about being watched. He told Tom that even though he'd seen his future, he couldn't remember the specifics anymore. The memories had faded like dreams. But the feeling remained, the certainty that his choices weren't his own, that he was just going through motions predetermined by something beyond his comprehension. Chen never spoke again after that visit. He spent the next 3 years in the facility before dying of what the official report called failure to thrive. He simply stopped eating, stopped responding to any stimulus, and wasted away. The doctors couldn't find any physical cause. It was as if he'd decided to stop existing. But that's not the worst story, Tom continued. About 15 years ago, a ranger named Alex Goodguy, smart, careful, found a staircase during a patrol. He reported it, was told to stay away. All the standard protocol, but he became obsessed with it. He started researching, talking to other rangers, trying to find answers. He went back to that staircase on his day off, climbed it. Sarah leaned forward. What happened? He came back different, not traumatized like that hiker, different. He finished his shift that day normally, drove home, had dinner with his wife. Then, according to her statement, he went into their garage around 10 p.m. She heard a noise, went to check on him, and found him building a staircase. He'd pulled out every tool they owned and was constructing a wooden staircase in the middle of their garage. No explanation. When she asked what he was doing, he just said, It has to be perfect. He spent the next 3 days building it. Didn't sleep, barely ate. His wife called his supervisor, and they put him on medical leave. He finished the staircase 12 steps, exactly like the one he'd found in the forest. Then he climbed to the top, stood there for a moment, and stepped off into nothing. Fell 12 feet onto the concrete garage floor, broke his neck, died instantly. The weird part. His wife said that in the moment before he stepped off, he smiled. She'd never seen him look so peaceful. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What happened to the staircase he built? The Park Service sent a team to remove it. They took it apart, burned the wood. His wife moved away. And the staircase Alex found in the forest, still there, as far as I know. They all are. We just mark them, avoid them, and hope no one stumbles across them. Sarah asked why they didn't fence them off, put up warning signs. Tom explained that they tried that once, years ago, but the signs would vanish. The fences would be found dismantled, the materials scattered, and in one case, a ranger who'd been assigned to monitor a fenced-off staircase disappeared. They found his gear, his radio, his truck, but he was gone. 3 months later, a hiker found him 40 miles away, sitting at the base of a different staircase, completely catatonic. The brass decided it was better to leave them alone, Tom said. Mark them internally. Keep people away through patrol patterns, but don't draw attention to them, because the more attention they get, the more people seem drawn to them. Sarah asked if he had any theories about what they were. Tom shrugged. I stopped trying to figure it out years ago. Some things in this world don't make sense, and maybe they're not supposed to. Maybe they're tests or traps or doors to somewhere we're not meant to go. All I know is that in 30 years, I've never heard of anything good coming from those stairs. After that conversation, Sarah's perspective changed. She continued finding staircases during her patrols. She found 2 more over the following year. Each time, she reported them, marked them, and left. But she also started noticing patterns in the reports from other rangers. Disappearances that happened near sectors where staircases had been found. Hikers who came back from the woods acting strangely, disoriented, unable to explain what had happened to them. There was one incident that particularly disturbed her. A family of 4 had gone hiking, parents and 2 teenage kids. They were experienced hikers, well prepared on a well-marked trail, but they never returned. A massive search operation was launched. Sarah was part of the team. On the 3rd day of the search, they found the mother sitting on a log about 2 miles from the main trail. She was alone, uninjured, but confused. She couldn't remember where her family was. She said they'd been hiking together, and then she wasn't sure. She remembered seeing something in the woods, something beautiful, and walking toward it. After that, nothing, until the search team found her. Sarah asked her what she'd seen. The woman's face went pale. Stairs, she whispered. Stairs in the woods. They were so beautiful, covered in flowers. My daughter said she wanted to see the view from the top. They never found the rest of the family. 3 people vanished without a trace. The official report listed it as a hiking accident, possible fall into a ravine or river, but Sarah checked her maps. There was a staircase marked just half a mile from where they'd found the mother. She transferred to a different park 2 years ago. She doesn't patrol anymore. She works the visitor center now, answering questions, selling permits, giving directions. She says she can sleep better knowing she's not in the woods after dark, knowing she won't stumble across another staircase, but she still thinks about them. She still wonders what's at the top, what people see when they climb those stairs. And sometimes, late at night when she's alone, she wonders if she made the right choice walking away. A part of her, a small part she doesn't like to acknowledge, is curious. And that curiosity terrifies her more than anything else. She ended our conversation with a warning. If you're ever hiking and you see a staircase where no staircase should be, turn around. Don't take photos yet. Don't get closer for a better look. Don't try to rationalize it or figure it out. Just leave. Because once you acknowledge it, once you show interest, it knows you're there. And maybe, just maybe, it won't let you leave. If these stories intrigue you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. We bring you accounts like these every week, and your support helps us continue sharing these experiences. Let's move on to our second story. Story 2. The Feral Child Protocol. Every National Park Service ranger receives training in what's called the FCP Feral Child Protocol. It's not in the public manual. It's not something they discuss with civilians. But it exists, and according to multiple rangers I've spoken with, it exists for a very specific reason. The protocol is simple. If you encounter a child alone in the wilderness, especially one who appears dirty, malnourished, or exhibits unusual behavior, you do not approach. You radio for backup immediately, maintain visual contact from a distance, and you absolutely do not call out to the child or try to help. This goes against every instinct a ranger has. These are people who've chosen a career helping others, protecting people in the wilderness. Being told not to help a child seems unconscionable, but the protocol exists, and it's drilled into every ranger during training. This particular story comes from a ranger named Marcus, who learned why the protocol exists during his second year on the job. Marcus had been a Marine before joining the Park Service. He'd served 2 tours overseas and had seen things that most people couldn't imagine. He considered himself unshakable. That changed in the Appalachians. He was patrolling a remote section of forest on a Tuesday afternoon in October. The weather was clear, temperature in the mid-50s, good visibility. He was about 7 miles from the nearest trailhead when he heard crying. Not the frightened crying of a lost child, something different. Rhythmic, almost mechanical. It had a cadence to it like a metronome. Cry for 3 seconds, silence for 2. Cry for 3 seconds, silence for 2. Over and over. He followed the sound for about 10 minutes, pushing through undergrowth, his hand instinctively going to his radio. He'd been trained for this. He knew the protocol. But he wanted to verify what he was dealing with before calling it in. He found her in a small depression between 2 large oak trees. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, sitting against one of the trees. She was filthy, her clothes torn, her hair matted with dirt and leaves. She was crying, but her face was blank. No tears. No emotion. No variation in expression. Just that mechanical, rhythmic crying. Every instinct told him to run to her, to help. She was clearly in distress, clearly needed medical attention. But his training kicked in. He stopped about 30 yards away, ducked behind a tree, and radioed dispatch. Dispatch. This is Ranger 23. I have a situation. Lone juvenile, approximately 7 years old, in Sector 12. Appears distressed and malnourished. Requesting guidance. There was a pause on the other end. Then Ranger 23. Confirm you said lone juvenile. Confirmed. Young girl, alone, crying. I need medical evac. Another pause, longer this time. Ranger 23, do not approach. Repeat, do not approach. What is the juvenile's behavior? Marcus described what he was seeing, the mechanical crying, the lack of tears, the blank expression. As he spoke, he kept his eyes on the girl. She hadn't moved, hadn't acknowledged his presence. Just kept crying with that same disturbing rhythm. Ranger 23, maintain distance of at least 30 yards. Keep visual contact. Do not call out to the juvenile. Do not attempt communication. Team is en route. ETA 25 minutes. Dispatch. This child clearly needs help. She could be Ranger 23. The voice on the radio was sharp now, authoritative. You are following Feral Child Protocol. Do not deviate. Maintain distance. Acknowledge. Marcus felt a chill. Feral Child Protocol. He'd heard about it in training, but it had seemed like a formality, something that would never actually apply. He acknowledged and settled in to wait, keeping his eyes on the girl. 5 minutes passed. The crying continued, never varying. Then it stopped, just cut off mid-cry. The silence was somehow worse than the crying had been. The forest around him seemed to hold its breath. The little girl's head tilted slightly like she was listening. Then she smiled. It wasn't a child's smile. It was wrong in a way Marcus couldn't fully articulate. Too wide, stretching her face in a way that didn't look natural. Too knowing, too aware. It was the smile of something that understood exactly what it was doing. Then she stood up, not like a tired, hurt child struggling to their feet. She simply rose, her movement fluid and controlled, like she'd never been distressed at all. She walked into the forest, not away from Marcus, not toward him, perpendicular to his position. She moved through the undergrowth without making a sound, without disturbing a single branch. She didn't push through the bush, she seemed to glide through them, like they weren't really there. Marcus watched, his training warring with his instincts. Wanted to follow, to track her, to figure out what was happening, but he stayed where he was. Something primal in his brain was screaming at him that following would be a mistake. The backup team arrived 23 minutes later for Rangers, all veterans. The team lead was a woman named Jennifer, who'd been with the service for 18 years. She asked Marcus to describe exactly what he'd seen, and he told her everything. Jennifer nodded grimly. You did the right thing. Show us where you saw her. They searched the area for 3 hours. Marcus led them to the exact spot where the girl had been sitting. They fanned out, looking for any sign of her passage. They found nothing. No footprints, no disturbed vegetation, no broken branches. It was as if she'd never been there. But they did find something else. About 100 yards from where Marcus had seen the girl, they discovered the remains of a campsite. Old, very old. Months, maybe years. The tent was collapsed and rotting, covered in fallen leaves. Inside, they found a decomposed backpack, a sleeping bag in tatters, and personal items that had been scattered by animals. In the remains of the backpack, they found a wallet. Inside was a photo ID for a woman named Rachel Summers, 28 years old, from Pennsylvania. Jennifer radioed it in. The response came back quickly. Rachel Summers had gone missing 14 months earlier. She'd been hiking alone in this section of the park. Her car had been found at a trailhead. Extensive searches had turned up nothing. She'd simply vanished. What they never found was her body. The campsite showed signs of habitation food wrappers, a small camp stove, evidence that she'd been there for several days at least. But there was no body, no indication of what had happened to her. As they were processing the scene, Jennifer pulled Marcus aside. I need to tell you something, she said. This isn't the first time. We've had reports of lone children in the wilderness going back decades, always the same pattern. They appear hurt or distressed, always alone, always in remote areas. Rangers who approach them, sometimes they come back, sometimes they don't. Marcus asked what she meant. Jennifer explained that in her 18 years, she'd heard of 6 incidents. In 4 of them, the ranger maintained distance, and the child disappeared, just like Marcus had witnessed. In 2 cases, the ranger ignored protocol and approached. The first one was about 12 years ago, Jennifer said. Ranger named Peter found a little boy, maybe 6 years old, crying in the woods. Peter was new, hadn't fully internalized the protocol. He ran to help. Another ranger was with him, hung back, radioed it in. She said Peter reached the boy, knelt down, asked if he was okay. The boy looked up at him and said, I've been waiting for you. Then they both vanished. It's gone, no trace. They searched for weeks, never found either of them. Peter's wife never gave up hope. She called every week for 2 years, asking if there was any news. Then 3 years after Peter disappeared, hikers found a body in a completely different section of the park, about 40 miles from where Peter vanished. It was him. He'd been dead for approximately 3 years, the coroner said. His body had been exposed to the elements the entire time. But here's the thing that still bothers me. He was lying on his back, arms folded across his chest, in the middle of a clear area, almost like he'd been placed there, and his face. The hiker said he looked peaceful, like he was sleeping. Marcus felt his stomach turn. What about the second incident? That one was worse, Jennifer said quietly. Happened about 7 years ago. Female ranger named Amy. She'd been with us for 5 years, knew the protocol, but she said she couldn't just stand by and watch a child suffer. The little girl she found was around 8, sitting by a stream, crying. Amy's partner tried to stop her, but Amy insisted. She approached the girl, spoke to her, even touched her shoulder. Amy came back, but she was different. She finished her shift, said the girl had run off before she could help. Nothing seemed wrong at first, but over the next few weeks, people noticed changes. Amy became withdrawn, stopped socializing with other rangers. She'd zone out during conversations, stare into space for long periods. She started taking strange detours during patrols, heading into remote areas for no apparent reason. 3 months after the incident, Amy didn't show up for her shift. They went to her apartment. She was gone. No note, no indication of where she'd gone. Her car was still there. All her possessions were still there, but Amy had vanished. 6 months later, hikers reported seeing a woman in the forest, wandering alone, wearing a ranger uniform. Multiple sightings over a period of weeks, always in the same general area where Amy had encountered the girl. Rangers went looking. They never found her. But the sightings continued for about a year, then stopped. Jennifer looked at Marcus intently. Whatever these things are, these children we see in the woods, they're not what they appear to be. They're bait or lures, or something worse. The protocol exists because experience has taught us that approaching them leads to nothing good. Marcus asked if there were theories about what they actually were. Jennifer shrugged. Plenty of theories. Some people think they're spirits, ghosts of children who died in the wilderness. Others think they're something older, something that's learned to take a form that humans can't resist approaching. A few rangers I've talked to think they're interdimensional, that they exist in multiple places at once and can move between them. Personally, I don't know what they are, but I know they're not human. I know they're dangerous. And I know that the people who've approached them either disappear or come back wrong. The search was eventually called off. The death of Rachel Summers was listed as a probable hiking accident, remains not recovered. No mention was made of the girl Marcus had seen. Officially, that incident never happened. But Marcus couldn't forget it. He started researching carefully, using the Park Service's internal databases. He found references to similar incidents going back to the 1970s reports of lone children in the wilderness. Sightings that didn't make sense, disappearances that followed encounters with these children. There was a report from 1982 about a group of hikers who'd seen a little boy in the woods, alone and crying. Against their better judgment, they approached. The boy looked up at them and ran. They followed, concerned for his safety. The group got separated in the pursuit. 2 of the hikers made it back to the trailhead. 3 didn't. Those 3 were never found. Another report from 1995 described a ranger who'd seen twin girls, identical, holding hands, standing in the middle of a trail at dusk. The ranger approached to ask if they were lost. As he got closer, he realized they weren't quite identical. One girl was a mirror image of the other, left-handed where her sister was right-handed, with a partner hair on the opposite side. When he was about 10 feet away, the girl smiled at him in perfect synchronization, turned, and walked off the trail in opposite directions. He radioed for help, but didn't follow. When backup arrived, they found no trace of the girls. But they did find something strange. 2 sets of footprints leading away from where the girls had been standing, but the footprints went in the same direction, overlapping perfectly, despite the girls having walked in opposite directions. Marcus also found reports that never made it into official records' handwritten notes. Personal accounts, stories passed between rangers. One described a teenager found sitting on a rock formation, perfectly still, staring at nothing. The ranger who found him said the teenager didn't blink, didn't breathe, just sat there like a statue. When the ranger moved to get a better angle, the teenager's head swiveled to follow him, smooth and mechanical, without the teenager's body moving at all. The ranger left immediately. When he came back with backup, the teenager was gone. Another account described a little girl who appeared at a campground, asking campers if they'd seen her mother. She went from campsite to campsite, asking the same question, always politely. Several people tried to help her, offered to take her to the ranger station. She'd smile and say, "No thank you, I'll keep looking." This went on for hours, the same girl, the same question. Then someone realized she was wearing the same clothes as a missing person poster that had been up for months, a woman who'd vanished in that park a year earlier. When they pointed this out, the girl smiled and walked into the forest. They tried to follow, but she vanished within seconds, despite the forest being relatively open in that area. Marcus became convinced that these entities, whatever they were drawn to certain people. Not everyone saw them. Many rangers went entire careers without an encounter, but those who did see them often saw them multiple times. He theorized that there was something about certain individuals that made them visible to these entities, or made the entities visible to them. He also noticed that encounters increased during certain times of year late fall and early spring, during transitional periods, and they were more common in areas where people had disappeared or died, though that correlation wasn't absolute. Marcus still works as a ranger. He's been on the job for 7 years now. He's seen 2 more lone children since that first encounter. Each time, he followed protocol. Each time, the child disappeared. And each time, they found something nearby, the remains of a campsite, personal belongings from a missing person, signs that something had happened in that location. He's convinced that these entities are markers, or remnants, or echoes of something that happened. Maybe they're connected to the people who died there. Maybe they're the last thing those people saw before they vanished. Or maybe they're predators that have learned the perfect disguise, the one thing humans can't ignore, a child in distress. Whatever they are, Marcus follows the protocol. He maintains distance. He doesn't approach. Because he's seen what happens to people who do, and he has no desire to become another cautionary tale, another missing person report, another mystery the Park Service can't solve. He ended our interview with this advice: if you're ever in the wilderness and you see a child alone, especially if something feels wrong about the situation, don't be a hero. Call for help. Yes, keep the child in sight if you can do so safely. But don't approach, because the woods are full of things that aren't what they seem, and the most dangerous ones are the ones that look the most innocent. Thank you for listening to this account. These stories come from real people who've experienced things they can't explain. If you'd like to hear more, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. We're not done yet. Let's move to Story 3. Story 3. The Missing Time. There's a phenomenon that park rangers rarely discuss, but many have experienced: missing time. Hours that vanish without explanation, leaving the ranger with no memory of what happened during that gap. It's not just disorientation or fatigue. It's chunks of time that simply disappear, leaving no trace except the clock that's moved forward and the unshakable feeling that something happened in that void. This account comes from a search and rescue coordinator named David Chen in Colorado, in relation to the hiker. From our first story, just an unfortunate coincidence that still bothers him. David had been leading SAR operations for 8 years when he experienced it himself, and the incident changed everything he thought he understood about the wilderness. They'd received a report of a missing hiker on a Thursday morning. The missing person was a 52-year-old man named Robert Hayes, an experienced hiker who'd done this particular trail dozens of times. He'd told his wife he'd be back by dinner the previous night. When he didn't return and didn't answer his phone, she'd waited until morning, then called it in. Standard protocol. David assembled his Team 6 experienced SAR members, all people he'd worked with for years. There was Martinez, a tracker with 15 years of experience. Sarah Kim, a climber who could navigate the most difficult terrain. Jackson Cole, a former Army Ranger. Linda Peterson, a paramedic who'd saved more lives than David could count. Tom Erickson, who knew the local flora and fauna better than anyone. And David himself. They met at the trailhead at 7:15 a.m. Robert's wife had provided them with a detailed description and the exact trail he'd planned to take. It was a 12-mile loop with moderate elevation gain, well marked, popular with local hikers. People didn't typically get lost on this trail, but the mountains could be unforgiving, and even experienced hikers made mistakes. They headed out at 7:30 a.m., moving at a steady pace. The weather was perfect clear skies, temperature in the low 60s, no wind to speak of. David was leading the group, with Martinez ranging ahead slightly, looking for any signs of disturbance off the trail. At 9:47 a.m., exactly, David remembered checking his watch. They came across something unusual, a circle of stones in the middle of the path. It's perfectly circular, about 6 feet in diameter, each stone roughly the same size, maybe 8 to 10 inches across. They were arranged with precise spacing, forming a ring that blocked the entire trail. David stopped. The team clustered around him. "Anyone seen anything like this before?" he asked. Martinez crouched down, examining the stones without touching them. "These aren't from around here," he said. "Look at them. They're all the same type of rock granite, I think. But this trail is mostly limestone and sandstone. Someone carried these here recently," David asked. "Hard to say. They're clean. No moss, no weathering. Could be yesterday. Could be this morning." David took several photos, logged the GPS coordinates, and radioed base. "Base, this is SAR-1. We've got something unusual on the trail. Circle of stones. Appears deliberate. Photographing and documenting." "Copy, SAR-1, the dispatcher responded. "Any signs of the missing person?" "Negative. 3 miles in, nothing so far. Keep us updated." The team discussed whether to disturb the circle. Linda pointed out that they needed to get through the trail continued on the other side, and stepping around the circle meant going into rough terrain on either side. They decided to step over the stones carefully, leaving them in place in case they were relevant to Robert's disappearance. David stepped over first, then turned to help Linda. As he did, he noticed something odd. The forest felt wrong. Too quiet. No birds, no insects, no wind, just silence, heavy and oppressive. He checked his watch. 9:47 a.m. "Let's keep moving," he said. Something about this place feels off. That's the last thing he remembers clearly. The next thing he knew, he was standing in the same spot on the trail, looking at the same circle of stones. His team was around him, all standing still, staring at the circle. No one was speaking. No one was moving. They were just standing there. David shook his head, trying to clear it. He felt groggy, disoriented, like he'd just woken up from a deep sleep. He checked his watch. 2:33 p.m. Nearly 5 hours had passed. What he started to say, but his throat was dry, his voice coming out as a croak. He tried again. "What just happened?" Martinez turned to look at him, his face pale. I don't know. We were going to cross the circle, and then we're here. But it was just a second ago, wasn't it?" Sarah Kim checked her own watch, then her phone. "It's 2:33, she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Was it 2:33? You just got here?" David radioed base, his hands fumbling with the radio. "Base, this is SAR-1. We have a situation." "SAR-1, go ahead." There's been some kind of incident." "What time do you show?" Current time is 14:34, SAR1. Is everything all right?
Yes.
What was our last check-in? There was a pause.
Yes.
SAR-21. Your last transmission was at 9:48. We've been trying to raise you for the past 4 hours and 50 minutes. We were about to send a secondary team. What's your status? David looked at his team. They were all checking their equipment, their phones, their watches. Everyone had the same confused, frightened expression. Base. We're okay. But we can't account for the last 5 hours. We have no memory of that time period. All 6 team members? Say again, SAR-1. We lost time. Base. Almost 5 hours. Last thing we remember is finding a circle of stones on the trail at 9:47. Next thing we know, it's 14:33 and we're still standing at the same location. There was a longer pause this time. David could hear muffled voices on the other end, someone giving instructions. Then a different voice came on the park supervisor, Richard Torres. David, this is Torres. I need you to listen carefully. I want you and your team to move away from that location immediately. Don't stop to investigate. Don't try to figure out what happened. Just leave that area now. Head back to base. We'll discuss this when you get here, sir. We still have a missing person to find. David, get your team out of there. That's an order. We'll send a fresh team to continue the search. David wanted to argue, but something in Torres' voice told him this wasn't a normal situation. Copy that. SAR-21, returning to base. The hike back was surreal. Nobody spoke much. They all kept checking their watches, their phones, as if the devices would suddenly reveal what had happened. David noticed that Jackson kept touching his face, like he was making sure he was real. Linda stumbled several times, something he'd never seen her do before. Martinez kept looking over his shoulder, as if expecting something to be following them. They reached base at 4:15 p.m. Torres was waiting for them with a medical team. Each team member was checked over vitals, blood pressure, pupil response, coordination tests. Everything came back normal. Physically, they were fine. Torres took David aside once the medical checks were complete. Tell me exactly what happened. Every detail you can remember. David recounted the morning, the assembly, the hike, finding the circle of stones. The last clear memory I have is looking at my watch and seeing 9:47. I remember thinking the forest felt too quiet. Then, nothing. Then, standing in the same spot, and it's 2:33. No dreams, no flashes of memory, no sense of time passing, nothing. It's like someone cut 5 hours out of my life. 1 second I'm there, the next second 5 hours have gone by, but for me it feels instantaneous. Torres nodded slowly. Check your cameras, all of you, and your GPS logs. David pulled out his camera. He scrolled through the photos. The last photo was of the circle of stones, timestamp 9:47 a.m. The next photo should have been, well, there should have been more photos, but there weren't any. The next photo on his camera was one he'd taken the previous day during a different patrol. My camera shows nothing between 9:47 and now, David said. But I always take photos during searches. Always. Why didn't I take any photos for 5 hours? They checked the other team members' cameras. Same thing. Everyone had photos time-stamped 9:47 a.m. or earlier, then nothing. The cameras had been turned off or simply not used during the missing time period. The GPS logs were even stranger. All 6 team members wore GPS trackers, standard equipment for SAR operations. The logs should have shown their movement throughout the day. But according to the GPS data, all 6 team members had remained in the exact same location from 9:48 a.m. to 2:33 p.m. 5 hours, standing in one spot, not moving at all. That's not possible, Martinez said, looking at his GPS unit. These things are accurate to within a few feet. There's no way we all stood perfectly still for 5 hours. Torres looked at David. I need to show you something. Come with me. He led David to his office and closed the door. From a locked file cabinet, he pulled out a folder marked Temporal Anomalies Classified. "What you experienced today isn't unique," Torres said. "It's rare, but it happens. We've documented 17 similar incidents over the past 30 years in parks across the country. Different locations, different circumstances, but always the same basic pattern. People encounter something unusually, some kind of geometric formation or pattern, and then time jumps forward, sometimes minutes, sometimes hours. Longest recorded incident was 11 hours. David stared at the folder. "Why haven't I heard about this?" "Because we don't talk about it. Officially, these incidents are classified as environmental disorientation due to elevation and fatigue. We log them internally. But the official reports don't include the temporal aspects. Can't explain it, and we can't prevent it, so we just document it and move on." Torres opened the folder and showed David reports from other incidents. One from 1994 described a ranger who'd lost 3 hours while patrolling a remote trail. Another from 2003 involved a group of 4 hikers who'd lost 6 hours while camping near a series of unusual rock formations. A report from 2011 detailed the rangers who'd lost 8 hours after encountering what they described as a pattern of stones arranged in a spiral. "What causes it?" David asked. "We don't know. Some people think it's related to unusual electromagnetic fields. Others think it's geological, some kind of anomaly in the rock formations that affects human perception or consciousness. A few researchers have suggested it might be related to unknown natural phenomena, maybe something involving quantum effects we don't fully understand, and the formations. The circles and spirals of stones? That's the consistent factor. Almost every documented incident involves some kind of geometric pattern, usually made of stones or natural materials. But we don't know if the patterns cause the effect, or if they're markers like they indicate where the effect naturally occurs." David thought about that. Are they dangerous? Beyond the lost time? Torres closed the folder. "Physically. No, everyone who's experienced this has been fine. No injuries, no lasting effects that we can measure, but psychologically, it's traumatic. Losing hours of your life with no memory of what happened. Some people recover quickly. Others have nightmares, anxiety, a sense that something was done to them during that time, even though they can't remember it. What about the missing hiker? Robert Hayes." Torres's expression darkened. "We sent a fresh team. They found him about 3 hours ago, 2 miles past where your team encountered the stone circle. He's alive, dehydrated and confused, but alive." Did he experience the same thing?" "He says he was hiking yesterday around noon when he came across the stone circle. Stopped to look at it, thought it was interesting. Then he was somewhere else, he's not sure where. He remembers being in a place that looked like the forest but felt wrong. The light was different, colors were off. He walked for what felt like hours but couldn't find the trail. Then suddenly he was back on the trail, but on a different section, and it was morning. He'd lost almost an entire day." David felt a chill. "Has he said anything else?" "He keeps saying he saw something in that other place, something watching him from the trees. But he can't describe it clearly. Says it hurt to look at it directly, like it was too bright or too dark or both at once. The medical team is evaluating him now." Over the following days, David and his team were all evaluated by psychologists. They were each given the same diagnosis: acute stress reaction and temporal disorientation. They were recommended for a week of leave, with follow-up counseling available if needed. But David couldn't let it go. He started researching on his own, carefully, using resources outside the Park Service. He found academic papers on temporal lobe epilepsy, on missing time episodes associated with altered states of consciousness. He found UFO research that documented missing time experiences. He found paranormal investigators discussing time slips and temporal anomalies. None of it quite fit what he'd experienced. This wasn't a seizure. All 6 team members had experienced it simultaneously. It wasn't psychological. The GPS logs and camera timestamps confirmed that real time had passed. It wasn't a hoax. Everyone on that team was a professional with years of experience. 3 weeks after the incident, David went back to the location. He didn't tell anyone. He took a personal day and hiked out alone. He needed to see the stone circle again, needed to understand what had happened. The circle was still there. The stones hadn't been moved. David approached carefully, stopping about 10 feet away. The forest was quiet, but not unnaturally so this time. Birds were singing. Wind moved through the trees. Everything seemed normal. He circled around the formation, taking photos from every angle. The stones were definitely granite, definitely not native to this area. Someone or something had placed them here deliberately. But why? And when? He noticed something he hadn't seen before. On one of the stones, barely visible, there was a marking. He crouched down, careful not to touch the stone, and examined it more closely. It looked like a symbol carved into the rock, a spiral with 3 arms. Like a triskelion, but more complex, with additional marks radiating from the center. David took several photos of the symbol, then stood up. He felt an urge to step into the circle, to stand in the center and see what would happen. But he resisted. Whatever had happened to him and his team, he had no desire to experience it again. As he was preparing to leave, he heard a sound behind him. He turned quickly. Standing about 50 yards away was Robert Hayes, the missing hiker they'd been searching for. "Robert?" David called out. "What are you doing out here?" Robert didn't respond. He just stood there, looking at the stone circle. David noticed that Robert was wearing the same clothes he'd been wearing when they found him 3 weeks ago. The same dirty hiking gear, the same torn jacket. "Robert, are you okay?" Robert turned to look at him, and David felt his blood run cold. There was something wrong with Robert's eyes. They were too dark, like the pupils had expanded to fill the entire iris. Robert was smiling, but it wasn't a natural smile. It was too wide, too fixed. "It showed me," Robert said, his voice flat and monotone. "When I was in the circle, it showed me where they go. All the lost people, they're not gone. They're just elsewhere, watching. Waiting." David took a step back. "Robert, I think you need to come with me. We should get you checked out." "I go back sometimes," Robert continued, as if David hadn't spoken. "When it's quiet, I stand in the circle, and I go there. Not like here. There's no time there. There's no time there. Just existence. Pure existence." Robert turned and walked into the forest, moving quickly despite the rough terrain. David tried to follow, but Robert was faster than he should have been, moving through the undergrowth like he knew exactly where every obstacle was. Within seconds, Robert had vanished into the trees. David radioed base immediately. "Base, this is David. I'm at the site of the temporal anomaly from 3 weeks ago. I just encountered Robert Hayes. He's acting strangely and has left the trail. I'm requesting backup. David, what are you doing at that location? You're supposed to be on leave." "I know, it doesn't matter. Robert Hayes is out here and he's not okay. He's talking about the stone circle, saying he goes back there. I think he's been coming out here regularly. Stay where you are. We're sending a team." The search team found Robert 2 days later, camping about a mile from the stone circle. He was coherent but refused to leave. Said he was studying the phenomenon, that he needed to understand what had happened to him. They eventually convinced him to return, but he left again 3 days later. His wife filed a missing person report, but Robert wasn't really missing. He was living in the forest near that stone circle. Park rangers occasionally see him out there. He's built a small camp, sustains himself with supplies. He hikes in and spends his days near the circle. He won't talk to anyone anymore. Just watches the circle and occasionally stands in the center for hours at a time. David transferred to a different park 6 months after the incident. He says he can't work in a place where time doesn't always behave the way it should, where 5 hours can vanish in an instant. He still has nightmares about it, dreams where he's stuck in that missing time, aware that time is passing, but unable to experience it. Watching from outside himself as hours slip away, his team members all had different reactions. Martinez quit the Park Service entirely, took a job as a wilderness guide where he controls the routes and avoids certain areas. Sarah Kim seems to have moved past it. Though David heard she refuses to participate in any SAR operations that involve unusual geological formations, Jackson transferred to a different unit. Linda still works SAR but always carries a voice recorder now, constantly recording during operations, trying to ensure she has proof of her continuous existence through time. David ended our interview with a warning. There are places in the wilderness where the rules don't apply, where time can skip like a scratched record. If you encounter geometric patterns made of stone circles, spirals, complex symbols, photograph them if you must, but don't step into them. Don't stand in the center. Don't try to understand them, because what you lose might not be just time. It might be something more fundamental, something you won't notice is gone until it's too late. I appreciate you sticking with these stories. If they're resonating with you, please show your support with a like and a subscription. It genuinely makes a difference.